Hi, I'm Dr. Brian Blackstock. I teach at the Michigan School of Professional Psychology, and my dissertation was published in 2006. The research question was, how is consciously embodied persona experienced through live-action role play? So I started my work in 2003 in doing the actual dissertation, and so I'm going to walk you a little bit through the process of what I studied in terms of the psychological literature at the time, generally about role play, and then I'll work you through what is phenomenology, and then how does it come across? What do LARPers tell us about their experience through a phenomenological lens? I started out, my first experience with LARP was at Michigan State University, and probably only 3 months a year does it look like that. But in the botanical gardens, and that was in '99 in my undergrad. And so several years later, when it came time to do dissertation research, I said, well, I think this is really worthy of real academic study. And no one on my committee knew anything about LARP or role playing, but they said, we believe you, you're invested in this, and so let's go on this ride. So in looking at the literature, because that's always the first thing to start, what has already been done in this field? 3 categories. The first one is diagnostic studies. So what psychologists typically like to do is give LARPers tests based on personality or other factors, and then compare them to what we say the norm group. Okay, how do LARPers and how do gamers compare to the norm in parentheses? And some studies found that LARPers actually were a little more introverted on scales, and they said less empathy. But most of the studies said, you know what, no significant difference between people that role play and people that choose other ways to spend their leisure time. Leeds came out with the one that Jose just mentioned this, that the conclusion that gamers were relatively normal when compared to satanic daggers. And what a relief, like someone finally got it out there in '95. So your D&D books are still safe, you're okay. But in general, the diagnostic profiling shows that there's not really a good profile for someone that enjoys live action role play or role play in general. The second area has to do with the impact of role-playing studies. So how does this affect a person? How does role-playing affect someone psychologically and emotionally? In general, they found that there were some environments that role-playing actually could be a little dangerous. That in some studies on an inpatient psychiatric unit for adolescents, role-playing had a disturbing effect, and so they had to ban it from the unit. Recently, there was something in the media about role-playing games being banned in prisons. And yet, here's the rationale. Because it might solicit fantasies of escape. Boy, yeah, in prison, the role-playing game is going to make you think about escaping. But people spend time, looking at this. Mainly, and this is the stuff I like, is that role-playing, as an activity can lead to deeper understandings of the self. That we access something else, we learn about ourselves through role-playing. And Shepard quotes, role-play can become an opportunity to express feelings like anger and hostility in new and unfamiliar ways that we might censor or repress in our waking lives, in our normal lives. And then something that's dear to my heart, the therapeutic effects in professional applications. This is Carl Rogers. Essentially, role-playing is used in many in training and education. I train master's students every year, and we do role-playing from day one on, how do you feel these kind of questions if you're going to be a therapist, ethical situations, etc. It's been used in literature. Some of the, I think, our studies talk about, hey, instead of reading Shakespeare, we're going to act out Shakespeare. And so you get a sense of motives and everything that's going on. And it makes Shakespeare and other forms of literature really come alive for students. The other one, most of my clinical experience has been in the field of addiction treatment. And I use role-playing in there when we're talking about relapse prevention, people that are going to go back out into the community after they've been, in terms of detox and short-term hospitalization. Hey, how are you going to deal when you go back home and your old using friends, are going to invite you over? We could say, well, I'll just say no. But when you get a room of, say, hardened addicts in there, we go, well, okay, let's bring it to life. Let's pretend this is Jerry and he's come home. How are you going to try to tempt him? And then we really bring it out, like, hey, this is what it's going to be like. You're going to face this kind of pressure in order to help them be ready for the outside environment and hopefully, and keep sobriety. The other piece that comes up here is that play as an activity has a psychoevolutionary purpose, meaning that play does something for us. Usually we think about it as in children, that's their job, is to play. That's how they re-express the world. But as adults, sometimes play gets lost, and yet play is an avenue where we can continue to learn and continue to grow as people. So my introduction to phenomenology came from my mentor and friend Blackstock, who taught me about transcendental phenomenology. He wrote several books. One is The Research Methods, and probably the one that I love the most, has the best description, Existential Psychotherapy and the Interpretation of Dreams. It's not your Freud dictionary style book. It gets into how does our dreaming life inform our waking life through a phenomenological lens. One of the key points of transcendental phenomenology is epoche. And Clark was Greek, and so a lot of his terms come from the Greek language. Epoche just essentially means to refrain from judgment, to abstain from, or stay away from the everyday ordinary way of perceiving things. He would say it's to become naive about a thing, to have a fresh mind, to really purge yourself of what you know so that you can purely understand. Okay, so it has a sense of that mindfulness or a meditative aspect, except that you're applying this when you're looking at transcripts and you're applying this in the interview. So it really takes this internal work, this practice, to get and sustain epoche so that you can be receptive to things that maybe counter your own sense of, I know how art works, or I know what they're saying here, oh, this means this. You've got to purge all that. And then you spend, if you've written a dissertation or a thesis, you spend a lot of time analyzing transcripts. And so that's what I'm going to report, is what I found in my dissertation was, in terms of phenomenology has some universal structures, at least Clark's version of the transcendental model. So he looks at how do people describe their experience in a couple different ways, in terms of bodyhood, causality, spatiality, temporality, materiality, and then relationship to self and others. And these are just below usually what we consciously pay attention to in our experience. So the first one, bodyhood, being alert to the conscious rhythms and sensations in our bodies. Some standard ones for LARPers. I mean, when I say this, you're going to probably just nod and go, oh yeah, that happens. In-character bursts of energy or adrenaline that come up. Feeling your heart race or your blood boil. And then also the taxing nature of role play. After a good night of role play, you can walk away pretty exhausted. Those are applications of bodyhood. Causality. Really, not cause and effect, but the awareness of chance, fate, luck, determinism, etc. on our experience. How things came to be as they are right now. So say your character has become Prince of the City. Was that your original goal? Did everything you do lead to that? Or how did that come to be? That's the nature of causality. It's a piece, it's somewhere on the spectrum between goals and the randomness, the entropy of life. Spatiality. Our sense of space, both physical and perceived, or what measurable and immeasurable would be ways to look at it. How it appears meaningful in our experience. So, physical space could have the sense of the game space. We are in this room, and yet we are also in Austria in 1864. Okay? Our perceived space has to do with what the simple form is closeness or distance between other people. We're not saying we're 10 feet away, I feel very close to someone, or we're miles away. So spatial reference within relationships. You also have game space versus the life space. Okay? And those are two things. Life, your life and your game, and sometimes people begin to prefer one space over the other. And that can cause some problems. And the other way space is measured is how does this create a space? Having a character being involved in role play, how does it create a space for growth and development? Temporality is time, and again we have 2 degrees of it. Public time and perceived time, and time has a lot of factors about when you write a character's background, that's the implicit form of how has time affected this character in terms of their beliefs, their judgments, their morals, etc. As well as time for that it takes to get into character, and then conversely to step out of character after you establish that. Materiality is really just a metaphor. A lot of that did not show up in the dissertation, but when we're saying qualities of weight, light, color, temperature, we're saying that I experienced a heaviness. That was a heavy scene. Well, what does that mean? That's materiality. It's relationship itself, concepts and attitudes that influence one's being and becoming in the world. The neat thing about this, and this could warrant further study, is that when we role play, we have a multitasking duality between what I know as player and what I know as character, and you're always mitigating this information. Sometimes people will find that they're dissatisfied with their own character. It's not fulfilling some essential need, like I'm not getting what I want out of this character, let me make another, let me try something else. And that's worthy of study. But a part of you is always part of the character. There's some baseline there. In terms of relationship to others, social benefits, making friends, where you can experience shades of morality, degrees of insanity. It's really the act of psychodrama in maybe its purest form. So the themes that came up from the data were for continuum of personalization, the stream of embodiment, the existential quality of freedom, and then a character as teacher. The continuum of personalization is just a launching point. How much is the character you or like you, and how much is different or the thou or the other? And most characters are a mix. I mean, some people play characters that are very close to themselves. Some people play the opposites. And then when we see the therapeutic growth, it's where someone picks a mix of these materials, that some of it's me, but some of it's not quite me, or a piece of me that I'm experimenting with. So basically, traits are either magnified or manufactured. The stream of embodiment talks about getting into character, getting into the role, and the process. And really the meat of this is that when you embody the character, when you fully get there, the character does things that you, remember the Noah test, would not do. You have the meta-knowledge that, yeah, I should not go up and slap the sheriff, but Mr. Krieger is going to go do that tonight. And that's just a different level of awareness. Freedom, that we're free to explore all sorts of realities that are not available to us. Most of the people that I interviewed talked about playing characters that were wealthy.